Hey everyone, my name's Patrick, and today I get to bring you your Daily Hope Devotional. I don't know about you, but sometimes it can be so hard to extend forgiveness to someone who's done something wrong. I find that challenging sometimes, and I don't know about where you're at in that regard, but Jesus gives us this great story in Matthew chapter 18 that I want to talk about and look at here. Matthew chapter 18, verse 23. Fascinating story, a story about a king who had loaned money to some servants and he wanted to settle the accounts. And so he called the servants together and he said, hey, it's time to settle the account. It's time to pay what you owe me. And there's one servant in particular who owed just an exorbitant amount of money. I mean, just an incredible amount of money to the king. And there's no way that this servant could pay it back. In fact, some say it was equivalent to about like $6 billion. And it's just shocking to think about that amount of debt that this servant owed this king. And he threw himself at the king's feet and he pleaded for mercy. And he said, wait, don't throw me and my family in jail. I will pay you back. And he just pleaded and he pleaded. And the king had compassion on this servant, and he said, you know what, I'm going to forgive you of this debt. I mean, just shocking to think about that the king would do this. This same servant, it said, left, and he found a friend of his, another servant, who owed him some money. It was probably about $12,000 equivalent in our day, which is still a lot of money, but in comparison to the $6 billion that he had just been forgiven of, really was a small amount. And it says here, Jesus talks about this parable, and he says that the servant went and he took his friend and he began to choke him. And he demanded that he would pay back the debt that he owed. And he threw his servant in jail, even though the servant pleaded and said, I will pay you back, give me some time. And he had no compassion on him. Well, word got back to the king that the servant who had been forgiven, $6 billion, did this to another friend. And he pulled him into his chamber and he said, this is uncalled for. He said, you wicked servant. He threw him into jail and into prison. Fascinating story. We look at this story and go, yeah, how could a servant who's been forgiven that much not show forgiveness to another who owed such a small amount of debt in comparison? This is a parable in the context of Jesus talking about forgiveness. Now, I don't want to make light of maybe a challenging situation that you might be experiencing, maybe a deep wound or someone has wronged you in a significant way. And I don't want to minimize that. I don't want to say that that's not important. I don't want to say that that's not painful or that's hard. But maybe one of our first steps in extending forgiveness should be to look at what God has forgiven us of. I know my debt because of my sin and your sin is far greater than $6 billion. And yet God has forgiven us. If you're having trouble forgiving, and I know sometimes I do, maybe our first step should be, let's look at how much we've been forgiven of. And as we rest in that reality and as we see what God has forgiven us from, we can then easier forgive others who wrong us. Lord, bless you as you consider this and as you think of ways in which you can extend forgiveness to others.